The authorities in a town in northwestern Poland decided to build an observation tower in a public park. Nothing special about that, right? It wasn't until a local archaeologist started digging. It seemed that he had found remains of a fort, but not just any fort. The legendary Jomsborg, or as people also call it, the Viking medieval New York. It's not unusual for Viking finds to pop up in this area. Archaeologists have suspected for a long time that the Polish island near Germany could be the site of the legendary city, and the locals believe in this too. Every year they hold the continent's biggest Viking festival there. People dress up and reenact the Vikings' way of life. The time period I'm talking about is the 10th century. Scholars believe Jomsborg thrived back then, if it was even real, and that's a big if. The mystery has been going on for more than half a millennium. The two most important questions troubling historians are whether the Viking stronghold was real and where it was located. The first historical records that mention the town can be traced back to the 12th century. Recently, a golden disc appeared in Sweden. It contained the names of Jomsborg and Harold Bluetooth. Does the man's last name sound familiar? That's because the Bluetooth technology we use today was named after him. He was a Danish king who apparently ruled over Jomsborg as well, and historians know he lived in the 10th century, right around the time the Viking legendary city reached its peak. All the historical sources we have lack one thing: the city's exact location. Ancient texts describe Jomsborg as a vibrant trading post that grew around a fortress. It had thousands of residents and a pier for ships to dock. This settlement should be somewhere along the southern coast of the Baltic Sea. Just the Polish section of the coastline is more than 4 times longer than the Grand Canyon. The city could be anywhere within the medieval Wendland. Today, this region is split between Germany and Poland, and it's called Pomerania. Luckily for archaeology buffs, there are clues. The Polish city with the newly discovered fort lies near a lagoon. According to ancient sources, the legendary city had room for hundreds of ships. Sagas put the total number of vessels at 360. These are Old Norse epics in prose. A lagoon is the perfect place to moor a large fleet. The waters here are calm. There are no big waves like in the open sea. Speaking of the sea, some historians believe that the city now lies underwater. According to them, the site was located off the northwest coast of Eustom Island. Today, this area is submerged under the Baltic Sea. Let's say Jomsborg really existed. Who lived there? The name of the inhabitants is not very imaginative: Vikings. These people are just as mysterious as their fabled city. They are mentioned in sagas and legends. And there are a couple of rune stones, those are raised stones with runic letters, that mention battles they took part in. Runes were a writing system used by Germanic peoples, including the Vikings, before they adopted the Latin script. And that's pretty much it. There's no hard archaeological evidence that would prove Vikings ever existed. If these myths and legends turn out to be true, then Jomsborg really resembled New York. All nationalities with historical ties to the region lived there: Germans, Slavs, and Vikings. Now keep in mind that a Viking wasn't a nationality but more of a profession. The hotspot of Viking activity was present-day Sweden and Denmark. A lot of Vikings had Scandinavian origins, but not all of them. In terms of genes, they were a mixed bunch. Scientists even found evidence that some Vikings came from southern Europe, but none of them wore those helmets with horns. We owe that image to 19th century operas. The real Vikings had simple iron helmets with a prominent nose guard. The Jomsvikings were sort of a brotherhood, and in any tight-knit community, members had to obey certain rules. One of them stated that you had to be brave. This meant that if your opponent is not bigger than you and didn't have better fighting tools, you weren't allowed to flee the scene. Sounds a bit far-fetched, but this was an actual Viking rule of conduct. Also, Vikings could leave the city for only 3 days. Any longer, absence required permission from the elders, and they wouldn't allow you to have a conflict with anyone from the Brotherhood. Forgive and forget seemed to have been the Vikings' motto. These rules sound fair, but Jomsborg didn't last long. It only existed for some 85 years. That's the length of the average lifespan in the European Union today. Basically, 1 human generation. In fact, the whole Viking Age lasted shortly, just over 2 centuries in total. But this was long enough to create the legend of the Norsemen. They are all over our popular culture. There was a TV show, Vikings, and the movie, The Northman. Even the animated movie How to Train Your Dragon had a little Viking as the main hero. and most of them mention a place from Norse mythology, Valhalla. Now, if Jomsborg is semi-legendary, Valhalla is 100% fiction. It is the Hall of Fallen Warriors. Remember how the Vikings had to honor a code of behavior? They did so in the hope of earning their place in Valhalla. This was a splendid place. The people there feast on boar meat every day, under a roof made of shields. Every Viking's dream, right? That's not all. They get into scrimmages with each other on a daily basis. But what exactly motivated the Vikings to take up a life of seafaring? There is no simple answer, but this seems to be a rags to riches story. Scandinavian people traded fur with other European nations. From them, they found out about the riches that lay to the south of their homeland. And they also knew that European leaders didn't always get along well with each other. So why not take advantage of this and earn extra cash on the side? The Vikings' motivation seems pretty modern. The very first raid was carried out by Norwegian Vikings. They sailed across the North Sea to northeast England. Europeans were shocked by the boldness of these raiders from the north. The Viking Age was about to begin. The Norsemen soon realized that European nations were ready to pay a hefty sum to avoid their visits. At the beginning of the 11th century, the English paid the Vikings more than $300,000 in today's money to leave them alone. There was even a special word for this tax. The influx of all this wealth made the Vikings' appetite only grow bigger. But this was all about to change in 1066, possibly the most important date in English history. That year, the last great Viking king went to England. However, he couldn't find victory at Stamford Bridge. Yes, the place where the Chelsea Football Club plays its matches today. After the Norwegian king lost, the number of raids decreased. The Europeans were better equipped to defend themselves. The Viking Age slowly came to an end. But this didn't mean that the Vikings were gone forever. They stayed in Iceland for 400 years. The island was largely uninhabited before they came in the 9th century. And in England, the Vikings left their trace in place names. Every town that ends in "by" was first settled by these Scandinavians. There are around 2,000 place names across Great Britain and Ireland that can be linked to the Vikings. And can you guess which part of France has the most Viking-related toponyms? The name says it all: Normandy. The mouth of the River Seine is where most Danish Vikings settled in the 9th century. From there, they sent several raiding parties to Paris itself.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.